Okay, Jazakallah khair for joining us. We're going to get started, inshallah. Thank you for being here with us. And so this is now a continuation of last week. What we had done, I'm just going to close the door 1 second, please. Thank you, sorry about that. So I'll make sure that this is projecting. There we go. Okay, so from our last week's class, we had just talked a bit about, unfortunately, this is going internet, but I'm not sure why. But keep an eye on it. It's not outdoors, on my screen. So we talked a bit about what does not work. We talked about these elements that do not work: punishing or humiliation. We talked about rewards. We talked about praise. We talked about over pampering and fixing, like doing everything for the kid rather than doing the child takes care of things on their own. Forgive me, I'm just curious to why I'm getting. Okay, and then we also spoke about punitive timeout and how all these elements can really cause a lot of rebellion from the child. It can cause them to lose their sense of self-esteem, to lose their confidence. There's a lot of things that could be that can have a detrimental impact on our kids. And these are elements that we are normal. We're used to doing these types of things as parents. It has happened to us. We have, okay, so because we're doing this, nobody's here with me live, I'm going to press pause and we're going to actually just disconnect from this camera and we'll go to a different camera. Please give me 1 moment to make that change. And I'm just going to share my screen. That's just the best thing to do. Okay. So here we go. It's not working very well there. So let's get started here. Okay. Let's see if there we go. Okay, so hopefully you can see my whole screen. I'm just going to quickly troubleshoot here. Forgive me for those who are online. We're just going to try and get set up here as quickly as possible. I apologize that this is taking long. Just want to make sure that we record this properly. I think I'll already end up standing here. I'm just checking on my phone to see what it looks like. I can see myself, but I can't see the screen. So just give me 1 moment, please. Okay, so now you can see everything. That's great. I'm going to turn off my phone so I don't record myself here. Okay, thank you very much. So last week when we had met, we had talked about these elements over here, and we mentioned that these are the elements that we as parents normally would participate in. We would think that that engaging in these types of activities are things that we have experienced while we were growing up, and by default we might think, well, if it worked on us and I'm perfectly normal, then most likely it'll work for my kids as well. And it's just a default position. I often make the comment that we're going to try to turn off this TV. It's not working, so interesting background, all that's going on. Okay, so this becomes our default position, and I may have mentioned this before, is that from the statement of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the fourth Caliph of Islam, where he made the statement, parent your children for this time, for you were, parent your children, sorry, for, do not parent your children the way that you are parented, your children are living at a different time. And, he's speaking within the context of maybe, 50 years. So the way we were parented is not necessarily how we should be parenting our children, because our children are living a different time. Our children are living in the time of the internet. When we were growing up, there was no internet. When we were growing up, we didn't have access to TV and media the way our children do today. We didn't grow up with social media the way our children are exposed to today. Teaching methods are different. Schooling may have been different. The curriculum may have been different. There are a lot more, for example, if you went to school back in even the 90s, you wouldn't have learned about quarks. Right, if you're taking chemistry, for example, that's something new. You will not have learned about the Higgs-boson principle, for example. There are elements of science that have been discovered in recent times. The way the history was taught before is different than the way history is taught now. We're living in a post-colonial era. So it is very, very different the way our children grew up versus ourselves. So to parent our children the way that we were parented, it really is not going to be a benefit to our children, and we ourselves are also going to be harmed in that process. So it is very important that we take into consideration what we have learned to do and what we can do differently. So if this doesn't work, then what does work? Well, let's try to get my PowerPoint to work there. Okay. So what does work? So the first thing to do, and again, we're talking about children who are younger, right? This whole series of workshops is for children who are below the age of 10, like 10 and below, if you want to take into consideration these strategies for that age group. So when children are 10 and below, it is important to remember that they do live a lot lower on the ground. They live a lot lower in the world. They live literally on the ground. All their toys are on the ground. Even kids want to read on the ground. When they're playing video games, they're sitting on the carpet. When they're watching TV, they're on the carpet. Even sometimes some kids, when they want to eat on the ground. So children are very much grounded. So if I'm talking from up here looking down at a child, you can imagine that they're seeing just my face. It can be very intimidating. It can be very scary. So what I have learned to do as a teacher in a classroom is to always get on my knees and to come down to the level of the kids, right? To speak to them face to face. In fact, if you ever go to a restaurant, what distinguishes a good waiter from a bad waiter is that the good waiter knows to sit at the eye level of their patron who they're taking the order from, right? This is how you make a connection with kids. This is how you make a connection and how you speak to people at their level. So if kids are on the ground, we also have to come down to the ground. That's the most important part, because when we come down to the ground, they only realize, why is there a Lego on the ground? Why are there toys on the ground? Why is there the book on the ground? And when we live on the ground with our kids, we have a better understanding of where they're coming from. If your spouse is standing up to you, you look up to your spouse like, oh, okay, no wonder it's intimidating. No wonder they get scared every time they see me, right? No wonder they get afraid, okay? Number two is actually genuinely trying to understand where kids are coming from. Help me understand. Help me understand, why are you fighting with your sibling? Help me understand why you don't want to have some dinner right now. Help me understand why you want to leave grandparents' house right now. Help me understand, why are your toys on the ground right now? Help me understand, whatever it might be. Okay. The third is to show humility to our kids. And what I have learned, again, as a teacher in the classroom, is that when I treat, and I mentioned this last week, is that when we treat our children, the ones who we're in charge of, the ones we're giving care to as caregivers, we treat them like they are miniature adults, because that's what they really are. They're human beings who just lack that 30 to 40 years of experience, lived experience, that you and I have as parents and as adults, right? So we are trying to teach them all the time. And oftentimes when we are working with our, I'm going to stand up now, sorry. When we are working with our children and we see that they've done something wrong, we're trying to teach them that you have to say, I'm sorry. And children are going to learn to say, I'm sorry, when they see adults, their parents, doing the same thing. So it's important that we begin with an apology too if we've done something wrong. Now, we have to be very careful about how we apologize. It's not to say we don't always have to take blame for what happened, right? It might be, for example, I'm sorry you got hurt. right? I'm not versus, I'm sorry, I hurt you, or I was the cause of your pain or something, right? Children, even teenagers will come down and they'll blame the teacher. I hate the teacher and I failed a test and so on. I'll begin as a guidance counselor in that position by saying, I'm sorry that you didn't study hard enough to get well in the test that you wanted to get, that you didn't get the mark that you wanted to. I'm sorry that you tried to ask questions during class and the teacher said, well, you can't answer those questions during the test. I'm sorry that you be very specific with what you're apologizing for, but you're still demonstrating apology. Now, if I did do something wrong as a parent, there's nothing wrong with saying I did something wrong. I'm sorry I pushed you on the ground. I'm sorry I forgot to get you breakfast first in the morning. I'm sorry I forgot to wake you up on time for school. I'm sorry I wasn't looking and I knocked over your plate. When we show humility, our children learn how to show humility as well. And then apologies can go a long way in repairing and restoring relationships, especially, all sorts of relationships, really. But that has to come from a place of humility. It has to come from a place of understanding. So it is important to build that into our conversation with our children. And the last is about using positive discipline tool cards, and we'll get to that momentarily. Okay, the actual strategy that I would like to talk about here. And if you recall, we had talked about the 5 criteria for discipline. Okay. In fact, maybe we'll do is just take a quick walk back here so you can just refresh our memory. Here they are, right? Is it respectful? Are we being kind and firm at the same time? And this is actually a strategy I want to talk about as well, being kind and firm at the same time. Does the child feel a sense of belonging? Do they feel significant in this disciplinary area where they're actually teaching? We're teaching our children how to be better. Is it effective long term? Does it teach valuable social life and life skills for good character building? And does it invite children to discover how capable they are when they use their power constructively? So I'm going to press pause on this before I go to the actual strategy, because I want to share an example that happened to me yesterday. Now, currently I'm a principal of a school. The school is a grade 7 to grade 12 school. And there's a student who made a series of errors. He was trying to demonstrate racist behavior towards Black students and Muslim students, and the child himself is Muslim. And so when we were having a conversation with the mother to help the child understand the wrong that they had done, the parent unfortunately took the side of the child and was not helping the child become better. When we invited the child to come and speak with myself as the administrator, the child refused. Now, if I was thinking from a parent point of view, how dare they disrespect me? Don't they know who I am? I'm the principal of the school. I'm the emir of this household. I am the emir of this household. I'm their mother. How dare they defy me? Or I could say, well, this is a kid in grade 8, 13 years old. He's short, small, new to the country, been in the country 4 years. He's an immigrant himself. And he's scared. He's operating from a place of fear. Because when you go to the principal's office, it's serious trouble. He might be worried he's going to be kicked out of school. Who knows, right? So approaching it from that lens, I asked a teacher for help, a teacher who he trusts, to bring the child down to see me. But for that to happen, the teacher had to talk with the child in a nice manner, not in front of their peers, in the hallway, explain who Mr. Zia is and what the purpose of the meeting is, to calm him down and bring him down to a level where he felt comfortable coming to my office with the teacher beside him. Then when he was there with the teacher, I asked permission that the teacher can leave now so I can speak with him. I began by telling the child, you're not in trouble. When he understood that, I'm not going to suspend you, I'm not going to expel you, I'm here to speak to you. All of a sudden, his temperature went way down. He sat on the sofa, I gave him a comfortable place to sit, and the teacher was able to leave, and I was able to have a conversation with the child. So I began by talking to the child about who he is, where he comes from, who his family is, how long he's been in Canada, and tried to explain to him and teach him all of these. Please come in. Sorry. And tried to explain to him where it is that we're coming from. I'm going to just continue, and I'll bring it up the speaking shot. We have people in person, so I'm going to have to switch my screen shortly. So basically, in order for the child to be able to listen to me, I was able to connect with him, build rapport with him, and then make sure that he felt all of these elements. So make sure he felt a sense of belonging to the school. He wasn't going to be kicked out. Speaking in a very calm tone. I was not sitting behind my desk. I was sitting right next to him. He was on the sofa. I was on a chair, but I was at his level, right? And then we talked about what is racism, why racism is wrong, and how we can make himself better. And when I spoke to him about, I didn't say to him, you're in trouble and how dare you, blah, blah, blah. I said to him, we go through life, we all make mistakes. I make mistakes, we all make mistakes. And when we make mistakes, we're there to learn from our mistakes so we can become better people. So then I invited him, what would you do differently if you're in that situation again, which is number 5, for him to actually come to his own realization about what he had done was wrong. And if he was in a conflict, how we could have resolved it without resorting to racism. Okay, I'm going to just change over my screen. Give me 1 second, please. See if that pops up there. Oh, I have to change the source. Okay. All right. We're talking about what doesn't work, and now we're going to what does work. Okay, so kind and firm strategy really is about understanding when we want to talk to our kids, we want to be able to get to them in a way that we are demonstrating to them a good character, we're respecting who they are as individuals, and we are showing them that we can validate their feelings, but that they have to also comply when we want them to comply with whatever it is that we're asking them to do. So it's about validating and also showing them that they have a chance to respect what we're talking about as well. And the importance of validating people is that what we're doing in that moment is that we're saying that you have a voice, and I'm going to listen to your voice, I'm going to respect your voice, and you're also going to hear what I need to say to you, and you're going to respect that voice as well, right? So this is a little about it needs to be kind and firm. Okay, so most of us can be kind and some of us can be firm, but it's hard to always have them both at the same time. And really the word but is the difference between being kind and firm versus being kind but firm, or firm but kind. When we use the word and in our language, it shows that whatever came before is as valid as whatever comes after. If I am saying something, for example, that I hear what you're saying, but what I'm saying is more important, then whatever I said I heard you say is no longer relevant. And it shows that I have no respect for them, I don't value their voice, and whatever good they have done is not worthwhile versus what they need to get done. So that word but versus the word and makes a big difference. So vocabulary does make a difference. Sometimes we are kind to our kids, we let them walk all over us, and then we reach our breaking point and we have a big giant blow up. Right, and we know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he talked about, the person came to ask him for advice. He replied, "Don't be angry," 3 times. And one of the explanations of this hadith is that the reason for him saying it 3 times is so that the first time something goes wrong, we should deal with our anger or a pet peeve in that moment. So it doesn't get to a point where something small, we had this problem. Right? Our kids might be bugging us, saying something to us, and then we're putting up with it, and the smallest thing. A spoon falls on the ground, or they forget to take the garbage out, and we have this big blow up, and we take away all the privileges, and we're yelling and screaming and losing our cool. So it is important that in the moment when these things are happening, we deal with our own emotional state immediately, so we can always maintain a line of cool and calm in the home. The other half of that is that where we are always being firm all the time, and we don't give any child a chance to speak. And then this is how we're teaching our kids to have tyranny. In many ways, we're almost bullying our own children when we're only being firm all the time instead of being kind and firm. So here's the example that we have over here. I don't want to stop playing. I know you don't want to stop playing your video game. I know you don't want to stop watching your TV program. I know you don't want to come back in the home right now. You want to keep playing with your friends. And it is time for Salat al-Maghrib. And it is time to eat dinner, and it is time to finish your homework, and then you can go back to playing your games. So this word "and" makes a big difference, because if I say "but," it means that I'm not validating your feelings. I don't care what you're doing, you better come here right now and pray. And so what happens as a result of that is whatever I'm actually trying to get the child to learn to do that which is more important, and we know that there's importance to praying and eating on time and doing the homework, what will happen as time goes on is that they will learn to hate the things that actually matter, because they were never validated for the things that they thought at that age do matter, right? And that's why you have people in their 30s and 40s who play video games all day long, don't do work, get fired from work, don't do well in university, and then also have difficulty, getting along with others. Do you brothers want a copy of the worksheet? I realize that you didn't have it with you. There's pens here as well. Well, both of you are here because last time I met, we both had spoken about some topics. So this is for both of you. I'll go over this after introduction. That's just information I brought for both of you based on the conversation we had 2 weeks ago.
Just one note, like a little note without that's like we've been waiting for almost 10, 15 minutes now.
I apologize. They put notes on the board. Yeah, and when you walk in, there's a board that said workshop upstairs.
Oh, really?
That's why I knew. That's why I knew. I apologize. I didn't.
Yeah, we were waiting inside the message for like 5-10 minutes, and then eventually asked someone, "Do you know where is it?" Like, yeah, it's upstairs.
Okay, I apologize. I had come down because I didn't know if anybody's coming, and then the brother was here helping me set up, and then I thought I'd just start because there are people online, so I apologize.
Okay.
All I did actually was I'll just share with you quickly. People online, forgive me. Just gonna go back. This is what I covered. Last time we talked about what didn't work until what does work.
Mm-hmm.
So very briefly, what I began with by saying is that it is important for us to, because we're talking about younger kids, is literally to come down on our knees when speaking to them. So when I, as a teacher in the classroom, when kids are sitting at the tables and I'm hovering over them, I'm looking like this, or I'm looking like this, or just looking at them. When they're looking straight up, you see this face looking at you, and it can be very scary and very intimidating. So, and oftentimes when we're walking around in our homes and we have young kids, we're stepping on toys, we're stepping on old food, maybe a book or something like that. What we need to understand is that kids live down here. Young children, they live on the ground, which is why they feel, the concept is called grounding, which is grounding is a concept used in many different, it's a term used in many different areas of study. But when it comes to child psychology, it's about literally living on the ground, which is why kids prefer to sit on the ground when they're watching TV, playing video games, even eating for that matter. They do prefer to sit down. What I've learned when I had young kids, when my kids were very young, we actually had got a table from IKEA that was a low table, and we would all sit at that table to eat together instead of sitting on the regular dining table. Usually we get kids a high chair so they can meet the same eye level as everybody eating. But when our kids got a bit older and they want to sit on chairs, we just got a small table, and we sat on that for years, right? So that it might be a little uncomfortable, but the chairs were made of wood and they were solid wood, so I was able to sit on myself. But when you're at their same level, then you start to understand what life is like at that level. So even when it came to the utensils in the kitchen, you usually put the spoons on the top drawer, and then you put the cooking utensils in the second drawer, then you have third and fourth drawer for other items. We reversed it. We put all of the utensils that our kids would need in the bottom two drawers, so they get access to their own utensils, their own bowls and plates. And we got small ones. Again, IKEA has all of these things for young kids. We got them all from there. And so that way, when it came to teaching, they were able to learn a lot about independence that way. They didn't need us to get the plates from the high shelf where they couldn't reach. Everything was at their level. Even in the washroom, right, bringing the stool up so that they could be at counter height rather than trying to get over the counter and not being able to reach it. In fact, in one home I went to go visit, the kids actually had the counter height of the washroom was a lower counter height for kids. So you can actually get them lower counter heights as well. So these are different accommodations that you start to learn how to make when you're actually living on the ground with the kids. As they get older, of course, things change. But while they are young, if you live on the ground with them, you start to be a better connection with them. I also talked about this question then, is help me understand, right? Knowing when we're talking with our kids, we have to help them have a voice and gain the independence with their voice by offering them and giving them a chance to explain wherever they're coming from. Help me understand why you want to play with your Lego now. Help me understand why you're not eating your dinner right now. Help me understand when we can do our homework and why you're not getting ready for bed. It's an opportunity for them to talk, to engage in dialogue with us, rather than us giving those demands and those commands. You better do this, you better do that. The third I was talking about is about apology. The concept of apology is a concept of humility, for us to admit that we did something wrong. And children will learn that when adults do exactly the same thing. So if I apologize to my kid, I'm sorry I knocked you down, I'm sorry I forgot to give you dinner on time, I'm sorry I knocked over your glass, I'm sorry I was angry with you, I'm sorry I sent you up without having your dinner. when we learn to have a humility in ourselves and we're teaching that to our kids through apology, then they will also learn that as well in time and also in turn. So then as they grow up and they do something wrong, they'll be first to say, I'm sorry, because they've seen that and experienced it themselves. And when we apologize to somebody, we're giving them back their rights that we took from them when we were angry and we disrespected them. So they learn to do the same thing in turn. This helps a lot with sibling rivalry because they learn to apologize to each other and maintain that relationship and that connection. The last one I'm going to come to at the end. You have a copy of it as well, the color copy. Okay. So going back to our explanation here. So I know you'd rather watch TV than do your homework. So we're showing understanding, and homework needs to be done first. You want to brush your teeth and we'll do it together. Want to race. This is an example of redirection. I know you don't want to mow the lawn, and what was our agreement? Right, waiting for them to remember the agreement that was made. You don't want to go to bed on time, and it is bedtime. You want one story or two stories as soon as your pajama jammies are on, right? I know you want to keep playing video games, and your time is up. You can turn off now, or be put into my closet. You give them a choice to make. So the point of this is to always take time to validate where they're coming from, to show some understanding, so that. But at the same time, be firm about what the expectation is. The language that I use as an administrator in school when speaking with staff is, I'll say, the expectation is, right? So example is that one staff I was working with decided that she was going to email the whole school about some issue that she had taken up. So I had to speak with her because she embarrassed another staff member. And I said to her, the expectation is the next time you're going to speak with the individual directly, not embarrass them in front of the whole school. Or if you have an issue, you come and speak with me. So the expectation is that's the firm part of what's going on, right? Of course, my conversation was listen to her and say, I understand where you're coming from. I understand you've been at the school 30 years. I understand this issue is very important to you. And the expectation is you will speak with an individual. You're not going to email the whole school. Or you come talk to me as a principal, I can help you out. So you validating, but also being firm. So what I'm saying is that this tool is great for kids, but I use it as an adult as well. I use it with adults and it works. So people want to be heard, especially as we get older, we want our respect. You know who I am? I'm the manager of the company, right? I've been here 30 years. So people want to have their positionality, their social location respected and to be brought up. And we do that, but we also set firm expectations for people to follow. Does this make sense? So I believe in your handout, there is some examples that are there. And I would recommend that you take time to try listening to the language that we use with our kids over the next 2 weeks. Listen to it and try to make this difference. Like try to use this language instead of what we might be used to. Okay, so it's about paying attention to our language and try using the word and instead of but, and validating and being firm at the same time versus one or the other. Right? Because as parents, we love our kids, we want to take care of them, we want to be kind, and we also have to be firm at the same time. Sometimes we have to have a happy hand, sometimes we have to just tell the kids what's going on. And maybe that's true in some cases, but as much as possible, try to validate and be firm at the same time. So this is one major strategy and what works. However, having said that, as our kids are growing up, what we're going to recognize is that we end up having the same conversations with our kids, the same all the time. And again, as a disciplinarian in the school, as a teacher or a guidance counselor or as an administrator, same thing happens. I'm talking to the same kids every day, right? The kid I was giving the example when he entered in, he's the first time I've seen him, but there's another student in the school, literally every single day, at least once, maybe twice a day, one of the administrators has to speak to him every single day, grade 7 student. And it gets tiring after a while. Teachers are getting tired. His peers are getting tired of him. And this is because, and I'll explain why it happens, but this is what happens, that even with their own kids, sometimes they're explaining the same thing over and over and over. Stop hitting your sister. Stop yelling at your brother. Stop running around the house, right? How many times did I tell you eat your dinner on time? How many times did I tell you brush your teeth when you wake up? This is, we actually become exasperated telling kids to do the same thing all the time. We wonder, why can't they learn things the first time, right? And then the question, of course, we asked this, I think, in one of our first classes is, why are my kids always pushing my buttons? They know I get angry about this. They know this is my pet peeve. Why do they keep doing this? So if you look at your in your worksheet again, this is a picture of the brain. I'm going to invite you to take this picture. I put it in color for a reason so that you can have this in your homes. And Michelle, you can keep this in a place where you will always remember this, what I'm going to show you. If we can understand how the brain develops, we're in a better position to always answer that question, why? Until, and I think I may have mentioned this last time, the brain takes time to develop, okay? The first part of the brain to develop is this part here called the amygdala. It's at the back of our head. When we feel stress, we put our hands at the back of our head, right? Feeling stressed out, you might not recognize this, but now you might, is that every time we're stressed out, our hand goes to the back of our head. This is a stress response: fight, flight, faint, or freeze. Fight, flight, faint, or freeze. So 3% of the world will fight back. 97% of the world does one of the other three: run away, freeze because you don't know what's going on, like a deer caught in headlights, or you faint, you just play dead. And we see this in animal behavior as well. Human beings react the same way. We get stressed out, we don't know what to do. This is why some people run from the police. They get into a police chase because they don't know what to do. Some people will stop the car and just become flustered and anxious. Some people who are used to will get into a fight with the police officer and start reporting the conversation, right? You can find it on YouTube. So this is the primitive, or what all human beings will resort to. As adults, we can work past that anxiety pretty quickly because we have tons of lived experience. The first time we get pulled over by the police officers, it can be very daunting. But the second, third, fourth time, we're okay with it. We don't shake as much. We know they want the driver's license. We know stay in the car. We know turn off the engine. We know what they want. It's a bit easier for us. And that's because of this part of your hippocampus, which is our memory. These are all the memories are kept. Okay. So the more lived experience and the more memories we have, the better we'll be able to deal with the amygdalian response, or that stress response. When our kids are young and they get a cut for the first time, or they have a cold for the first time, they're like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? How are we going to fix them? How are we going to, we panic. But the second time, we're like, that's okay. We've been there before. We know what to do. We know what medicine to give them. It's okay. Even ourselves, like I know every winter I develop this little, almost like a bronchitis. I know I need amoxicillin. I'll call the doctor. He'll give it to me. I'll get the medicine. I'm okay now. But the first couple times it happened, I thought maybe I'm developing lung cancer because it's a pretty serious cough and it hurts a lot and everything. You can't breathe very well. So as we build up our lived experience, we can deal with stress pretty easily. First time I'm having an exam, for me, it was in grade 9, many years ago. And I remember very stressed out, sweating, worrying, can't sleep the night before. By the time you get to grade 12, it's okay, being there before, it's not a big deal. So the more we build up our hippocampus, the easier it will be to deal with stress response. But what helps us a lot more to interpret the stress, to interpret our memories, is the prefrontal cortex, which is literally right behind our forehead. Which is why when we're thinking of something, what do? We start scratching. This is the problem-solving part of our brain. We're trying to, revive our prefrontal cortex. That's why we do this. When we're stressed out, we put our hand back here. When we're trying to remember something, what do? Where do we scratch? Usually we're scratching the top of our head. That's why. These are amazing responses we have, right? The response to create our body that we do things not conscious of why we're doing them. When we see the structure of the brain, we realize why. Stressed out, trying to remember something, trying to figure out a problem. Sometimes we do this. Anybody know why? Acupressure point, which is linked to the prefrontal cortex. Right? You scratch here, there's 2 lines that go right to your prefrontal cortex at the chin. Rather interesting. So the point of this is that the prefrontal cortex, which is our thinking, problem solving, we should know better part of our brain, takes how many years to develop? 24 years to 25 years. And that's why we are dealing with our kids the same thing over and over and over again. Why they can't remember, why they can't remember the first time, because their prefrontal cortex doesn't develop to age 24 or 25. And that's why even teenagers, you think they would know better, but they don't. You still find teenagers making bad decisions about smoking in the washroom or getting into a fight or running down the hallway and falling down. Really strange things they do, even though they go to 15, 16, they should know better. They don't. They biologically don't know any better. So now we think of our 6-year-old and our 8-year-old or our 10-year-old at home. And this is the reason why they keep pushing our buttons, why they've never seen them the first time, why they're always teasing and pushing their sibling or whatever it might be. This is why. This is why we have to be so patient with our kids growing up, right? It's also why age of marriage, people say, oh, get them married early, but sometimes we want to get them married a little bit later. Some kids are more mature. Some kids' prefrontal cortex develops a lot faster. Some takes a bit longer, but the average is age 24 to 25, right? You'll find adults who are age 30 years old who are making poor decisions. Again, I was a department head of special education at one of my schools, and some of the teachers were quite young, maybe in their mid-20s, or maybe late 20s, showing up late to work, leaving early, taking off on their prep period, thinking they could just leave the school, not preparing for the lessons, forgetting to call home, forgetting to call in sick. I would think they would know better because the prefrontal cortex should be developed, but even then, people, even adults at that age can have mistakes. So, keeping in mind the fact that the prefrontal cortex, it doesn't develop for a long time. There is a reason why this behavior develops. So the reason I'm asking you to take this to put this in your home somewhere where you can always see it and remember this is, number one, so we can temper our temper and our response to kids. But number two is how we control our own emotions will help us develop a strong relationship with our own kids. So I'm going to show a quick film here. So hopefully we can hear this, inshallah.
One of the most rewarding experiences for me has been to study brain science and apply it to the experience of parenting. And the hand model of the brain that I use to teach parents is very useful to understand that. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your palm, put your fingers over the top, this is a very useful model of the brain. And when we can actually see in front of us what's going on in the brain, then we can change what the brain does. So let me walk you through very basically what happens in this brain and the structures in it. And it goes like this. The spinal cord comes up, representing the wrist, and then you have coming up into the skull, the brain stem and the limbic area, which work together to help regulate arousal and your emotions and the way you have a fight, flight, freeze response. These are below the cortex, the limbic and brainstem areas, and the cortex is this higher part of the brain that allows us to perceive the outside world, to think and reason. And this frontmost part of the brain, right behind your forehead, so the person's oriented like this, is actually the part that regulates the subcortical, limbic, and brainstem areas. This regulation is very important because sometimes we can have all sorts of things happen in our life. We're tired, we're exhausted, someone pushes a particular emotional button, and we can flip our lids. So rather than being tuned in and connected and balanced and flexible, we can lose all of that flexibility, even lose moral reasoning, and act in ways that are terrifying to others, including our children. Now, you can actually bring yourself back online and come back to the high road and make a repair with your child. And that's important to explain to them. And you can also use this hand model of the brain to explain to children, even as young as 5 and 6, how to understand when their emotions are rising up from the brainstem and limbic areas here, and how it's overriding the prefrontal area and making it so they may be about to flip their lids. So I've had kids come tell me that they're about to go flip their lids and they need a break. They need a timeout. And by even just naming that, they can tame it. And that's the power of using the hand model for ourselves and our children to help us all make sense of what goes on in the emotional communication that we have in the course of day-to-day life.
So as you're mentioning, so imagine we're with our child and we're having a conflict with our child. If we flip our lid, our child is also going to flip their lid. So when I'm in a classroom setting and I'm sitting there with a teenager, he's talking out of turn, and I say, "Hey, you, Abdullah, why are you talking?" I flip my lid. Abdullah's going to respond, "Why? You can't tell me to do anything. Make me." Right? So now we're in a confrontational situation. So the more that we can maintain our composure, the more our children will maintain their composure. If we're going to lose our composure, it's okay for us to say, "I need a timeout." So as an administrator, sometimes you're dealing with kids, I know that they're lying. They don't want to admit what they did wrong because they know they're going to get suspended. And they're making up stories that even themselves are not true. One kid he called another student terrorist. So I had to speak with him. He said, "No, I said tourist." Why are you going to call someone a tourist? We know the kid's lying, right? So I was getting agitated and I said, "You know what? I need to take a small break." So before I flipped my lid, I regulated my own emotion by saying, "I need to take a break." And we go away, calm down, have some water, come back, and then refresh, and then I'm able to deal with it, maintaining my composure. But when I teach this to my own children at home, and I've taught this even as a teacher to kids as well, especially in guidance when I'm trying to now, often this happens in class, so I'll have to have a meeting with the teacher and the student to bring them back together so that they can repair their relationship so the student go back to class and feel like it's okay. Because oftentimes kids, when this happens in class, they don't want to go back to that teacher. They'd rather skip class, which is harmful to them, harmful to the teacher as well. So by teaching this to our kids, they can start to recognize when they're about to lose their composure. And we see our kids losing composure, we say, oh, you're flipping your lid. This flipping your lid language helps kids recognize when they have flipped their lid. So we can say, it looks like you flipped your lid. Or if and we're human beings, I'm going to flip my lid too. And I will say to them, I'm sorry, I flipped my lid. I'm sorry about flipping my lid. I'm sorry about what I said, because when I flipped my lid, I probably said things that I shouldn't have said. I probably used language I shouldn't have used. I'm sure it made you feel really horrible. I'm really sorry about that. Right? So, even sometimes we see our kids, they flip their lid. We say, I see you flipped your lid. Come back to me when your lid is back on. Right? And then we give our kids time to regulate their emotion. And when they're ready to talk to us, they come back down again. One of the roles I had was dealing in a contact room. Contact room was for kids who have a behavioral problem. So these kids would yell and scream at their teacher, maybe swear at the teacher, and they come down to see me in the contact room. And the first thing I have them do is I'd have these squeeze toys in the room. They would squeeze the toys until they calm down. They would have pacing walking back place. They could pace walking back and forth. Sorry. We had a fish bowl there, so they could sit on the sofa and just kind of calm down. I had different tools. And then I had them write out what happened, because writing things out also calms them down, brings them back to composure. Right. And then I'm able to have a conversation with them about, okay, what happened in class? Who said what? Let's review. Okay. So this part here, which I shared with you, this is part of the conversation that we had last week. And those are at home. If you want to send me a quick email, I will send this to you as well. Steps to problem solving. Okay. So when we are working with our kids, these are the steps we would take. Right. Especially if they're in conflict with us, conflict with themselves, conflict with somebody else in the world. Right. So take time to describe the problem. What are you feeling? Right. Explore the who, what, when, where, why, of what the problem is, what the conflict is occurring. Right. And then identify the real problem. Okay. Was someone being arrogant? Was somebody being ignorant? Was somebody talking out of turn? Was somebody doing something they weren't supposed to? Was it haram? Was it that bad? Like what actually happened? Give it a name. There was bullying going on. There was racism going on. There was discrimination happening. Whatever it might be, give it a name for kids so that they start to develop vocabulary. So when they're in that situation again, they can say, hey, you're being racist. Hey, you're discriminating against me. Hey, you're bullying me. Hey, you're abusing me, whatever it might be. So they learn the language so that they can defend themselves if ever in the situation again. The second step is deciding on a goal. What needs to happen to make things better? How are we going to repair this relationship between you and your sibling, you and your grandparent, you and me, right? How are you going to solve this problem with yourself? Right? And then making goals about what is possible, but helping kids understand to make a realistic goal. It's not realistic that you punch your brother once a day and you'll be okay. Punching somebody else is not a solution. That's going to cause more harm. That's not a realistic goal. So let's come up with a goal that actually works. Stop and think about how to actually plan, right? Take time to think, really think, is this conflict with me? Do I have a problem? And I'll give you an example of a teacher who she kicked the kid out of class. So it was wintertime, the kids had to take their boots off and put their indoor shoes on. Their boots were at the back of the room. One kid, his boot has fallen over, kicks the kid out of class. Who was that harming? Nobody. Who was the problem with? The teacher, not the student, right? Sometimes we as people have our own pet peeves. It's our problem. I have a problem with the boot being knocked over. Why is that a reason to send the kid to the office? Doesn't make any sense. So helping them understand, right? And then brainstorming solutions. I have the time here, sorry. Okay, we all have the time. So brainstorming solutions about how to actually make sure that if there is a problem, how we can solve it, and then actually making a script. Oftentimes when our kids are young, they don't have the words to say what they want to say. They don't have the words. They actually don't have words. So that's why they scream and they yell and they punch and they throw things down, because they don't know what to do with that emotion that they have. They don't have words. And when you don't have words, you become frustrated. That's why we call them the terrible twos and the treacherous threes, because they don't have vocabulary. So when kids are that young, we teach them sign language. Right? Babies can learn baby sign language. So I learned there's a person named Andy Garcia. He sounds like a movie star, but Andy Garcia, you can look at, there's an app actually on your iPhone or Google Play Store called Baby Sign Language. So for kids as young as 6, I've experienced this with my own kids. I experienced it with our D. So I was in charge of a DD program, kids who are developmentally delayed. So they're 15, 16 years old, but mentally they're 6 months to a year old. So we teach them baby sign language, and that way they can communicate and they don't have to get frustrated, right? So this is what we help kids when they're younger, but as they get older, we give them words to say what they need to say. And then we try to actually implement the dialogue. So we do some role play. Okay, if I'm your sibling and this happens next time, what are you going to say to me so that you don't have to punch me or throw something or have a temper tantrum? Actually act it out. And then go back and at the last episode actually see, did this work or did it not work? And what can we do differently next time?
So for the vocabulary, how to help the kids learning vocabulary? We don't speak like we speak our mother tongue in home, but he has some issues expressing himself in school because this is not his he's not used to it. So is there a way like where we can teach him the vocabulary to express himself in his second language, which is English?
You can work with the teacher, a classroom teacher, if they have an ESL monitor teacher. Most schools have an ESL teacher that can assist, or they call them an ISSP teacher. That's the ISSP. I don't know what the acronym stands for, but basically it's a person who's a guidance counselor who can actually help the child with this, if that deficit is there for us as parents. There's a book called Life Scripts. If you can just send me an email, I'll send the PDF to you. It's an adult book and gives you scenarios that if you're at work and you want to ask the boss for a raise, how do you script the conversation? So that's something I have used as an adult to learn some new vocabulary for myself because of the roles that I'm in. So I'll send that book to you. You might be able to see some of the vocabulary there. Another book, which you can buy, is very cheap at Amazon. It's called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and How to Listen So Kids Will Talk. The authors Faber, Faber, and Mazlish, Mazlish. Faber and Mazlish, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, How to Listen So Kids Will Talk. It's, I know it's a very, when you read it, you're like, this kind of awkward language because we're not used to it. It's not how we grew up. Even myself, like I didn't grow up with this kind of weird language. My parents didn't talk to me like this. But when I use it with my own kids, they're okay. They actually were very receptive to it because that's the language that they learn at the streets and at school, in their clubs that they're part of. So it is very different language. But it works. So but to me, I'll send you Life Script one, and this one you can buy. I think it's like maybe $10, $15 on Amazon. You can get the digital version. It's very cheap.
So do you think it helps if I speak English at home, or should I speak to my mother tongue? So
you can speak your mother tongue. It depends on where the conflict is happening. If the conflict is happening home between siblings or between parents, like from child to parent, use the mother tongue if that's what you're using at home. But tell them how to say it. And then if it's happening at school, go through it in English. So maybe show them both sets, because each language has its own culture and each culture has its own way of speaking, right? And literal translation oftentimes doesn't work. So when I taught ESL, I had to teach kids that, if you're going to talk in your own mother language, it is a very different culture. So I used to teach ESL for many years, and I taught science and math. Math is universal language, but science is not. And you can say things literally translated to a different language, but there's a context that is missing. So it is important to look at where the conflict is happening and use the language that's most appropriate at that time, right? My parents taught me, okay, this is how we talk at home. When you go outside, you talk this way, right? And it's called code switching. You speak one way at home, one way at school, one way with this set of friends, this way with a different set of friends, right? We naturally do this. At our home, we speak differently with our family. We don't talk the same way at work, unless they speak the same language as something different, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So after this brain science understanding of it, how to respond to this, okay, is really about taking time, proactively teach them this. If we have the brain model in the home, now my kids have memorized this because we kept it. I have a whiteboard in the home where we do our teaching and stuff, so I kept it there for a long time, so they have memorized it. And this model comes in very handy. And you can even, when they're young and they don't want to use the words, my older child, when she was maybe like 7, 8 years old, she would just do this. Like telling me, like, just calm down because you're flipping your lid, right? Or she's flipping her lid. So it just became even a sign language because we use sign language in the home when they were younger. But it's about helping them understand that this has happened, okay, and it's okay. Because us getting upset with our children for them losing their temper doesn't help the situation. If they've already flipped their lid and I flipped their lid because they flipped their lid, what am I teaching them? I'm teaching them that if you get angry, it's okay. And if someone's angry with you, get angry at them too. And we just get into conflict everywhere we go. And you might meet these people in life where parents will walk in and they're mean and I'm angry and I'm upset. They haven't even said anything to us yet. They haven't said, good morning, how are you? Have a seat. Like I remember in Saudi Arabia when I taught there, the first thing you do when a person comes, Assalamu alaikum, have a seat, have some chai. Right? They give you some tea to have right away, right? Some kahwa, whatever, just get them to calm down and then you can have a conversation. Right? Just a little bit of that conversation, dialogue to get to know somebody. And that's just a culture. Right? But here the culture is different. I mean, but my style is always invite the parent in and have a conversation with them, even if they're angry. Talk with them, even on the phone. How are you doing? How's work? How's life? How talk about COVID? Just get them to open up a little bit. Then let's talk about the problem, because that's how you build relationships. And then people do better when they feel better. Okay, this person's hearing me. I trust them a bit now. Now they're going to talk to me. They're talking in a calm tone of voice. When people are not, I'll say, you know what? I can't have this conversation with you right now because you lost your cool. Let's have this conversation maybe tomorrow when you got a chance to calm down. And then hang up the phone. Right? So it is important that when we are talking to people, we're always in the same state of mind. We're trying to teach our kids a lesson. We have to have our lid closed. Right? So when these things occur, when we do lose our lid, there's something called a positive timeout. A positive timeout is a place where we can go and we can relax and we can feel emotionally stable. A lot of kids do this naturally, and we as adults do this naturally as well. We call it a nest. It's called nesting. We see animals do this. Birds make a nest. It's at home. We do this naturally somewhere in the home. Oftentimes we use our bedroom. That's just a default place. Some people use the kitchen. Some people use the basement. In our school, that contact program I was mentioning, that was the nest for a lot of kids. They like to come there and chill out, relax. Again, there's things for them to do so they could calm down. In the guidance office, very similar. I set up a very similar kind of program in the guidance office. Kids would come there during lunch because they felt a home. Stop talking for a minute. We're almost done. So we'll finish on time, inshallah.
It's okay. I'm not gonna hide.
Okay, so when we may have seen our wives do this when they're expecting their first child, they actually start cleaning the home. We do this now. We make a baby's room. We make a crib for them. We paint the walls different colors. We buy toys. We buy diapers for them. We start building a nest for our kids. And so, like I said, at school, we do this in the guidance office, in the contact room. Some kids like a specific teacher because it feels like they're included in that space. So what I'm offering for us here as a strategy is to help us build a positive timeout space for our children in the home somewhere where they can go and they can feel safe and secure. A place for them when they flip their lid, they can go there and calm down, and they can bring themselves back and maintain their composure and become emotionally stable again. So it can be anywhere, but the most important, there should be some guidance. So for my kids, I said, the computer and the iPad and the iPhone cannot be your nest. Because in some cases, it might help distract from anxiety. I understand that. But when I want them to go to a nest, I want them to be in a meditative state to calm down. Go make wudu, make salah if you have to, right? Whatever it takes to calm down. Have a Quran there, recite Quran. If you want to take from whichever memory, that's fine. But if sometimes they want to say things to themselves, that's fine. Whatever they want to do to calm themselves down until they feel whole again. So I'm going to share with you a couple of them here. Okay. And there's some information in your workbook as well. So here's an example of a bedroom. It's got stuffed animals in it. It's got a window. This is the person who can calm down. This is my own kids, right? So it's a place that she made a little nest for herself so she can calm down in this situation. And got a special pillow for her with her name on it so that she can feel that it's her place. Okay. This is another place. Okay. It looks very messy, but this is a place to go and calm down. It's an arts and crafts corner, right? This can also be a nest. This can be a place where somebody can go and engage in some sort of activity that just calms them all the way down. Because some people like activity calm them down. A lot of people do cooking to be calm. A lot of people do baking to be calm. Some people do exercise to be calm. There's different things, right? In my home, I have a punching bag. That's for myself. I go outside, put my gloves on. If I get angry, if I need to calm down, I'll go and punch. I used to box when I was younger, so it just became something that would calm me down. There's a teacher at my school. Whenever she gets angry, I see her on the track running around. Usually at lunchtime, she goes for a quick jog around the track to calm down. So different people have different ways of doing things. Maybe as adults, we can discover what we do. Here's another type of a desk, right? So this is not as messy, perhaps. Some kids like it more clean, right? But again, it's a place where they can go and calm down. So a desk can also be a nest, a positive timeout space. Right? It could be something on the ground, right? Again, when kids are very young, again, they live on the ground, right? So this is something that a child can make on the ground, right? So whatever might be, some soft stuff there, some teddy bears, some pillows, whatever they want to do, but it's a place where they can actually create their own physical nest on the ground. So every kid, depending on how big, tall, age, what gender there are, they're going to make a different type of a nest. It could be in different locations in the home, right? But I'm showing this one specifically if you have young kids or maybe 6 years old and younger, because they're so close to the ground, they might want to make a nest on the ground. By the way, this is a lot of younger kids like soft things. So you can't see it, but under here is this brown one here. It's a washroom mat, but it's super soft. It's called microfiber, right? So my child, when she was younger, she used to do that. And you like just like soft things and calm her down. I'm showing you real life examples, so you know this is, I'm not just talking nonsense, right? These are things that work, right? So this is for an older child, okay? But you know, this is like a workstation for them, but they've got their board with them, which has like some alphabet, that they've got like a little poem here. Same child now has what they call a vision board. They put pictures on there in terms of what they want to look like, be like in the future, right? So some kids will have a vision board over there, but every person's going to have their own version of a nest, right? So the strategy is to give them a positive space to calm down, to having to whenever they have their lid, they know where they can go to calm down. They have elements there which will get their brain distracted, maybe a book to read, other than the Quran, whatever our children are into, maybe a calculator, they want to do math, I don't know. Every kid is different. But a place for them to go and be calm, right? And then that was the last strategy I wanted to share. And then these are 52 discipline tool cards. It's expensive to buy, so I bought one set. I just scanned them in for you. You can download this as an app as well. It's called Positive Parenting. Positive Parenting. The name of the author is Jane Nelson, Nelson. Jane, Jane. And Positive Discipline is the name of her institution or her resources. So if you want to download on your phone, you can, but I copied the most relevant ones for you on this paper here so that you can review them and see which of these positive discipline tools you might be able to use. So the kind and firm that I shared earlier, that's where I got it from. Again, having used it in the classroom and having used it in real life, I do find it very useful. The other thing I want to mention, because again, this came up last time, is the Sunday night hoedown. Remember I mentioned this to you last time? So Sunday nights in my family, we sit down in a circle and we pass this ball around. So what happens, you pass the ball and wherever your thumbs land, there's a couple questions there. And you pick which question to ask. And they're all different questions. This one, for example, something I wish we could eat next month. This other one, the best show I watched on television this week. So I'm going to roll it to you. You can take a look at it. Sorry. Reach it. So the softball, the volleyball, soccer ball, and we don't throw it at each other. We just kind of toss it to each other, and we just take turns asking the questions, right? So because now the kids get older, they don't want to have the same questions over and over again. So I bought these. These are called thumb balls. Okay. So if you look at them on Amazon, even thumb balls, that's what they all are. It's exactly the same concept. You grab it wherever your thumb lands. There's something there. I'm helpful to my family when, right? This one here. Okay. First and middle name, last name, who would I like to meet, 3 wishes, colors you like. This one here. I can call myself by the power of positive thinking. I can show compassion by as kids get older. So this is more of older ball, because they can talk about what this means. Mindful walking, they can talk about what that means, how it applies to them.
And what age can we start doing this? At what age for the kids?
I started this when my youngest was 4 years old. I'll give you the question to her, and she'll be able to do it. So we've been doing it for a long time. I have changed the questions over the years. I just come up with new questions.
And this is called thumb ball, is it?
Thumb ball, yeah. And actually on that one, there's the organization that makes it. I think it says there's a white square, will play the name of the organization where I got it from. I attended, is there a name there?
Youth Light.
Yeah, there you go, Youth Light. So I had attended a workshop one time, and they were selling these. I was so amazed. I got these in 2013. And so they have come in handy. I have there was many of them, so I bought a whole bunch of them. So I use them in my workshops with kids as well, my teenage workshops. But I use them in my home, and it comes in very handy as well. So as the kids grow, you change the questions accordingly. When kids are 4 years old, 5 years old, questions like, what's your favorite color? What color is the sky? Just things to encourage conversation. But as they get older, might be real questions like, what do you like to watch on YouTube? What qualities make a good friend? What's the best part of teamwork? Whatever it might be.
So we can get an encouraging conversation. If my kid is like, he's already lost the conversation and he'll come and ask for it and we'll give the time and do I still need to do something like this? So
it's up to you. The reason I did this, we do as a family together, and for me, it's family time. So I call it MBS time. I'll talk about MBS in the workshop. This is number 2, so I think number 4. Mind, body, spirit time. So every day, every week, we try our best as parents to give each child 15 minutes of MBS time, where we sit with them and all my devices are off. I'm 100% for them, and then we take turns. We'll switch over children, right? So each child gets their 15 minutes with the parent. Initially, we were doing it every day. Now they're a bit older, so we're doing it once a week, twice a week. For my older child, I do it every single day because she's in high school and she just needs that encouragement, right? So every kid's different, every time period is different. But we did this as family time. So Sunday night is always a scary night for most families, for kids especially. Weekend has come to an end, now you have to go to school the next day, then do my homework, what's gonna happen? It's a lot of fear, right? People get the whole Sunday blues or the Monday blues. So Sunday night, we did this as a fun activity. We're gonna go to sleep now, and let's go to sleep in a positive, in a happy way, a positive end of the weekend, and prepare for the next day. And it's just family time, so it just keeps the family coming together, because as kids get older, they want to spend more and more time on their own. They don't want to spend time with the family, right?
Yeah.
And that's why families have a rule when the kids are young. Dinner time, we all eat together. Breakfast, lunch may be different, snack time may be different, but we all eat dinner together. We all pray Maghrib together. Like in my home, as it gets older, we can only pray one prayer together. Usually it's Maghrib, or these days Isha, because time of going home is quite late. So but there has to be something that does together at least once a day, or at least once a week, right? So that you keep your family together as the kids get older and older, right?
and it has to be like the whole family together, or can it be like father, son time, something like this?
Yeah, that's what that MBS time is, father, son time, mother, son time. So if you have one child that you have 15 minutes, your wife will get 15 minutes. Just 15 minutes what the child wants to do. They decide what is going to work for them, right? They can make that decision on their own.
And if they could decide to watch TV.
That's fine. And they get to choose what's on TV, that's fine. But then we'll talk about TV another time. But I have questions with my kids, right? So I look at media as a teaching tool, not a teaching stool, which means that in the classroom, to tell teachers, okay, you can put a movie on, but if you're going to go sleep in the back of the classroom, there's a problem. You have to you show a movie clip. You talk about that clip. You talk about what's the lesson from this, what's the moral of this, right? So if your kids want to watch TV, maybe talk to them, let's watch Blue's Clues together. Let's watch Berenstain Bears together. Let's watch shows which have a moral to it, right? And then you talk and you learn about it. Or let's watch NASA TV together. Let's learn about planets on YouTube or something, so that you're guiding them in terms of what to watch, so that when they get older, they're not watching garbage. There's so much fawahish on TV, right? So you're teaching them, especially when they're what is acceptable to watch on TV, what should you use TV for. As they go, they're still going to watch entertainment stuff, but at least they'll know what's not appropriate, what's also appropriate. A website that I use called Common Sense Media, commonsensemedia.org. It's a free, it's free for kids, for kid login. For parents, it's $30, I think, the year. But you can type in any book, video game, or movie, and it'll give you a whole rendition of what's in it: nudity, violence, language, drinking and drugs. It tells you consumerism, leadership, good character, it's all in there. It tells you on a rating of 1 to 5, and then tells you what you're going to see. So before you watch something with them or buy a book for them, you can type it in here and it'll tell you everything about it. And even for the movies, it gives you 5 questions to ask before and 5 questions to ask after. So there is some dialogue with what you're watching, right? Because what I taught my kids is that we are by default consumers. Everything we're consuming is not just through our mouth, through our eyes and through our ears, music and TV or other forms of media. And that all has an impact on how we think and how we feel. So if I'm gonna watch a horror movie, or I'm gonna watch an action movie, and if that action movie has a ton of swearing, like Die Hard, Bruce Willis, old movie, all the swearing, how's that gonna impact me? If I'm listening to music that has swearing, if I'm listening to music which has garbage in, like love and romance and all that kind of stuff, how's that gonna impact me? So make wise decisions about what we consume, so we can interpret it, right? So critical thinking is part of this. I may have mentioned this before, but you walk into a restaurant, I think because we have conversations, but why have they chosen to paint the colors of the wall this color specifically? Why have they chosen to put this on the menu? Why are the colors the way they are? Why are people dressed the way they're dressed? If you go to one restaurant, the waiters are dressed in uniform. A different restaurant, there's no uniform. Why? What difference does that make? Why some places have like a 10-page menu and one place has like a 1-page menu? It's just critical to think about all these things that we are consuming so that they take time to really learn about the world. And it's just all about conversation and dialogue, of having a guided dialogue, guided conversation, so that as they get older, they become more aware of their surroundings. It's not perfect, but it keeps them thinking. And so I've done this is what I used to do as a teacher in the classroom. And it just conversations, dialogue, and then I try it with my own kids from a younger age as they're growing up. And I find that now my older is 15 years old. So her conversations are very different than I think other kids her own age, right? And my younger brother, his kid is now 12 years old and 13 years old. His conversation, 12 years old, his conversation, I think he's in grade 9 already, because it's the maturity of the mind to have conversations that have meaning to them, right? So the more the kids are engaged with the world, the less there's going to be zombies walking around. I know it takes time as a parent to think about these things. I have a bit of an advantage because as a teacher, I have this training, right? And I have practice of 20-something years of doing this with like 90 kids every year. So I've gotten used to like what works, what doesn't work, and then what I'll take home and try, and I will not take home and try. Right? A lot of these parenting tools that I'm teaching here and getting these books and everything else I'm sharing with you are also found in teaching books too. Right? Like all these child psychology books, teenage psychology books, there are same strategies.
Yeah, okay, so as long as you put this up realistically, what like an average parent can do of this, like I'm still learning this on my son's already 6.
Yeah.
So
you can start any age.
and it's gonna take me actually time to start implementing whatever I'm learning and reflecting it on him. It's gonna be some time, but
that's fine. You take one strategy, make it work. Once you're comfortable with it and you change the culture of how you speak, try the next strategy. Right. So our first class, the strategy was about getting them to think. Like, what can you do? What can you do to make sure that your clothes don't smell in the morning? What can you do to make sure that you're wearing fresh clothing in the morning? What can you do to make sure you don't freeze to death outside? We were asking them questions to get them thinking about what they need to do, like brush their teeth or do the laundry or dress warmly in the wintertime. And this strategy is about being kind and firm, so changing our language to using the word and instead of but. Even our native language, like looking at where we might use, like where that might apply in the same in our native languages, our first language as well. And then when it comes to the brain, please put this up somewhere, and slowly it'll just become part of the culture. And start doing this with the kids, right? So do one thing at a time. I'm giving you all of these strategies. You cannot. I don't expect you to go home and next 2 weeks and do all of this. That would not be realistic, right? So one thing at a time. And what I share is things that work for me and my family and me as a teacher. So I look at my kids growing up in a Muslim household, and I look at the non-Muslim kids, the Muslim kids I'm working with at school over the last 20 years, and whatever works with those kids. So so some things I'm sharing with you don't work with my own kids, but they'll work for kids in general. The stuff that doesn't work, I'm not sharing with you. You're taking this strategy, you're gonna try them at home, and you're gonna see what works and what doesn't work, right? So not all of this will work in your families. You have to see what works and what doesn't work. Like this, like the hoedown. My wife took a course in brain gym, and she's a Montessori teacher, so it's a different context. We have two teachers in the home, so it's a very different context, right? So we took it, we tried it. It didn't work at first. Then we tried different versions of it. And then we decided to let's try a thumb ball. I had the small ones. I said, let's try a big one because kids have trouble with the smaller ones. They like roll around the bigger ones. Also, they don't want them whipping the small balls at each other, right? So I use the bigger one. So then we just roll it. And it started working because it was easier for them to have a conversation and a choice of a question to look at. And at first I wasn't talking, put your thumb on the ball. Just roll the ball, whatever you want to ask, whatever question they want to look at, they can look at. And then I said, now you can toss the ball, now look at your thumb. So it evolves over time, right?
Yeah, and back to the same point. So you think that having kind of a question will encourage the conversation, or just having some time and where he starts sharing whatever he wants?
Those are two different things. This is a structured activity, and the NDS time is unstructured activity.
So we should have both.
Yeah.
So what is the point of having both?
So the NDS time is directed by the child. The child is the owner of that moment. They're the owner of that 15, 20 minutes with you. They can decide what they want to do in that moment. This time is structured time. Now you're guiding, this is your time. You're guiding, we're all together, but you're the teacher and you're guiding the lesson, right? So this is structured time that you're guiding. This is unstructured time that the child is guiding. Like in a classroom setting, I've got my 20-minute lesson. I've got my 20-minute homework time, 10 minutes to take up. Now 10 minutes is your time. And I give them 5 things that they can do. They can review the material. They can talk to a partner. They can go for a walk around the room. It's like these are things that they can. It's still structured, but it's their time, right? They can have a choice. So it's a difference when you're guiding, when the kid's guiding. When you're guiding the discussion, you have your questions. They're guiding, you have their own questions.
And for example, if we have a specific time, like every night, come and tell me what happened on your day. This is considered to be structured or not structured.
So it would still be structured time because you're setting a time and you're having a conversation with them, right?
Mhm.
Unstructured in the same way would be that you have an informal conversation. Every day after motherhood, you just sit down in a circle together and you just talk about what happened today.
So for example, tell me what happened on your day, and when you're done, you can discuss anything you want. This is kind of structured and unstructured.
Yeah, kind of same thing. But when you're having a conversation with kids about tell me about your day, it's good to begin with your stories.
Mhm.
So that's what I learned to do. And I actually learned from my father because it actually encourages conversation. I learned this with my youngest brother when he was growing up. The only word he would ever say is fine. Anytime you ask him a question, how are you doing? Fine. What's going on? Fine. Wait for homework? Fine. He didn't want to talk. But when my father started talking about what happened at his workplace, and we would laugh or we would get kind of puzzled and confused by what's happening at his workplace, then we started talking. So my kids and it's working too. I come home, I talk about what happened during the day. They always want to hear what happened today. And I'll talk to them and then they'll tell me about their day. So you open up the conversation first.
I work from home, I don't have
Oh,
much to share.
well, maybe it's a news story you heard. Maybe something was on your mind or something like that. You can just find something to talk about.
I have my desk in my bedroom, it's like literally just jump to my desk. There's not much to share.
So how do you manage to do, like, to ask the kids to do Isha prayer, especially when it's quite late in the summer? That's one thing. And the other thing is even during winter time, it's quite late for bedtime when they have to go at 7:30 or 8. Well, we do Isha where I live at 7:45. By the time I come back home, it's 8:15. If I take them to bed at this time, it will be 9 o'clock.
Right.
So how do you manage around that?
So for me, I always let myself in until they become mukallaf, I can be flexible with their times of prayer, right? So I don't have expectations when they're young that I have to pray stuff at Isha or anything. So I would just pray the prayer that I knew that they would be awake for and they would be engaged in. So usually like Asr or Maghrib, during the day, on the weekend, we pray Dhuhr together. I didn't expect Fajr together. Fajr we only pray together during Ramadan, even till today. Because they'll get up for Fajr, but they'll get up in a very sleepy time where they get up 5 minutes before sunrise to pray, right? They won't get up at the beginning of Fajr, especially as they become teenagers. You have to do what's easiest for you and for your kids as well. And if they're younger and you don't want them to get to 9 o'clock, you have to go sleep at a certain time, then pray Maghrib together. And if you're not home to do that, when you are home, you can pray with them like on a weekend or something. You pray time that you're you know, if you have a spouse that's home that she can maybe help out and get the kids praying together or leading in a prayer or something of that sort. That's also something that you can do together. If you can't pray with them, if you come in late, maybe just have a conversation about something to do with character, something to do with, how can we, I don't know, it might be, my tagline, my email is, how will you make today better than tomorrow? Right? So this is a question I ask myself. So then I'll ask my kids this question. So you had a bad day today, how will tomorrow be better than today? So just invite conversation about reliance on Allah, like Allah, and depending on what happened, Allah, like just basic concepts of conversations like that. Even with teenagers, I'm not heavy with so much religious talk because it can turn them off when they become teenagers, right? So it's got to be conversations that are relevant to them in their context today, right? Like even like some kids, mashallah, they're very different. They're mature with deen from an early age. They're like kufar by the time they're 12, and they can maintain that all the way through. Then there's those kids who just need their own time to grow and develop, right? So every child is different. I know families where you've got like the eldest son is Hafid and the other kids are not, but they're all religious, but every kid has their own capacity. And some kids develop early and some kids maybe into their 20s before they start taking on religion. Right? So I know for ourselves as parents, as Muslim parents, we want our kids to have that identity, but the identity I want can be through character development. It doesn't have to be through the rituals and like Quran and Salah and Siyam, like do as much of it as you can, but for me, it's the character that matters the most, right? If there's a hadith in Muslim Ahmed that I came from, Prophet came for no other reason than to perfect good character. So that's what I focus on, even with Muslim kids in the schools. Most of the problems I've dealt with that are suspendable offenses are Muslim kids doing good. So I'm not asking them why aren't you praying and why should you Quran. I talk about character. Like, why should you not be hanging out with the girl in the washroom? Is there a problem? Do you think there's a problem with that? I talk to the Muslim girl. You're wearing hijab. Why are you with this guy in the corner of the school doing X, Y, and Z? And so focus on what's right and what's wrong. Right? Like go back to Furqan. What's right and what's wrong. Remind them of their fitrah. Like this is the basics. Like this way I find. I'm talking about teenagers. For younger kids, they want to please their parents. The parents are the center of the universe. They want them to pray, they'll pray. If we want them to read Quran, they're going to read Quran. But it gets to a certain age and they want to do things by their own volition. They want to do it. By the age of 10, 11, it has to be their choice to do it. So in that case, you might ask them a question. But by 10, 11, maybe they're going to sleep at 9 o'clock and being asked them, so which prayer we're going to pray together today? Which passages of the Quran are we going to read together today? Right? Or these kind of questions, let them guide, but you're telling them we're going to pray together, you get to decide which one, or which two, or which three. Right? I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Does that help, Aaron?
Thank you so much.
Also, I'm planning on changing the time. I realize this is an awkward time of day for us to meet on a Saturday afternoon. So I was talking with the brothers here about changing the time to maybe, sorry, where's my, I'm not trying to end this, okay, let's end in a second. Changing to Friday night. Initially we're on Friday nights, so think about Friday night again. Is that okay for you, for both of you?
No, for him, not for me.
Oh, okay.
I drive all the way from Kitchener.
Oh,
so
wow.
This is perfect.
Oh, it's perfect for you, okay. We'll have to see, inshallah. Initially was Friday nights and there are more people coming, and I changed to Saturday, because I had a situation in my family, I was able to come on Friday nights. Okay. All right, and you have my email address. We can always talk on the phone if you want to as well, if you catch up, inshallah. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jazakallah khairan.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you, of course.